3 in the morning, and Mara Ellington was doing what she always did on the quiet stretch between 2 and 4, straightening things. The security desk on the 31st floor of Meridian Capital Group had one persistent problem. Whoever worked the day shift always left the visitor log at a 4-degree angle. Always. Like it was a personal challenge. Mara had mentioned it to the day supervisor twice. The third time, she accepted it as her nightly ritual. Straighten the log, center the pen holder, move the coffee mug back from the edge where someone had left it like a dare against gravity, and begin her sweep. She had been doing this for 7 months. Before Meridian Capital, she had been a junior data analyst at a boutique investment firm in Midtown. Before that, she'd had what people called a promising career. Before that is where things got complicated. But that's not where this story starts. This story starts at 3:04 in the morning when Mara reached the server corridor on the 31st floor and stopped. The access panel to server room C, the one that housed Meridian's live deal documents, was showing a green light. Green meant open. Green was never supposed to mean open at 3 a.m. Mara had the kind of brain that noticed when things were off. Not in a dramatic way, not the way people notice a car crash or a fire alarm. She noticed the way some people notice a painting hung 2 inches too low. A quiet, insistent pull, like a splinter you can't stop touching. She pushed the door open. Dylan Pratt was standing at the main terminal, a USB drive plugged into the side port, watching a progress bar tick toward 100%. Dylan Pratt, Chief Operating Officer, 13 years at Meridian, the man whose framed photo appeared on the company's Our Leadership page directly beneath CEO Corbin Hayes. He looked up. Mara looked at the USB drive, then at him. Then at the file names visible on the screen: KTI Pitch Deck Final V4, KTI Term Sheet Draft, KTI Investor Package OG, and she felt something in her chest go very still. KTI, Korea Tech Innovations, the $800 million deal that had been in quiet negotiation for 11 months, the deal that was supposed to close in 4 days. "You should go back to your desk," Dylan said. His voice was even, almost bored. "That drive," Mara said, "is none of your business. Everything on this floor is my business between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. She pulled out her phone. "I'm going to have to document this." Dylan took a step toward her, and for one long second the room was very quiet. Then he smiled, the kind of smile that had probably worked in a lot of boardrooms, and unplugged the drive. "You're going to want to be very careful," he said, "about what you think you saw." He walked past her. His shoulder almost touched hers. She didn't move. When he was gone, Mara stood in server room C for 45 seconds, looking at the terminal he'd left logged in, looking at the completed transfer notification still visible on the screen, and then she took 11 photographs with her phone. The terminal, the timestamp, the file list, the access log, and the open door. Then she went back to the security desk, sat down, straightened the visitor log to 0 degrees, and spent the next 2 hours writing up the most thorough incident report of her career. At 7 in the morning, Corbin Hayes arrived at the office, wearing the expression of a man who had decided, somewhere between his apartment and the elevator, that today was going to be manageable. He was wrong, but he didn't know that yet. His assistant, a young man named Patrice, met him at the elevator with a tablet and a summary of his morning calendar. Behind Patrice stood Mara Ellington, in her security uniform, holding a printed incident report with both hands like she was presenting evidence at a formal tribunal. Which, in a way, she was. "She's been waiting since 6:15, Patrice said, with the tone of someone who had tried and failed to suggest she come back later. Corbin looked at Mara. She looked back at him. She had steady eyes, the kind that didn't look away to make things comfortable. "My office," he said. He read the report standing up. Mara sat in the chair across from his desk and waited. She had learned, in 7 months of night shifts and 3 years before that of conference rooms full of people who didn't take her seriously, how to wait. Corbin set the report down. He picked it up again. He set it down again. "Dylan has been with this company for 13 years, he said finally. "I know. He has full access to the server rooms. There's nothing technically irregular about his keycard entry. The access was at 3:04 a.m. The file transfer was 11.2 gigabytes. I photographed the terminal." Mara placed her phone on his desk, screen up showing the first photograph. "The timestamp is visible, so is the file name. KTI Pitch Deck Final Version 4. Corbin looked at the photograph. He had a particular way of doing that, looking at something while clearly thinking about 3 other things simultaneously. She noticed it. She also noticed that his coffee mug was on the left side of his keyboard when he was right-handed, which meant someone had placed it there and he hadn't registered it yet. She filed both observations away. "What were you doing in the server corridor?" he asked. "Patrol." "You patrol server room C?" "I patrol the entire floor." She paused. "The access panel light was green. Green is never correct at 3 a.m. I investigated." Corbin leaned back. He was quiet for long enough that Mara understood he wasn't dismissing her. He was genuinely thinking. "I'll look into it," he said. She picked up her phone. "The KTI meeting is in 4 days." "I'm aware." "If that pitch deck is already in someone else's hands." His voice was even, not unkind. "I said I'll look into it." She stood, smoothed the front of her uniform, and moved his coffee mug from the left side of his keyboard to the right side on her way out. He blinked at the mug, then at the door. He didn't look into it fast enough. By noon, Dylan had already been in Corbin's office for 40 minutes. Mara watched through the glass wall from across the floor. She had stayed past her shift. Something she told herself was professional diligence, and not the specific anxiety of waiting to see whether someone would tell the truth. She could see Dylan laughing at one point, gesturing expansively. The body language of a man explaining that a small misunderstanding had been blown dramatically out of proportion. At 1:15, Corbin's door opened. Dylan walked out first. He looked across the floor, found Mara, and gave her a look that wasn't angry, which was somehow worse. It was the look of someone who had already won and was letting her know. Patrice appeared at Mara's elbow. "Mr. Hayes wants you in the conference room. Level 30 in 5 minutes. A beat. The whole security and operations team has been called in." The conference room had 12 people in it when Mara arrived. Dylan stood at the head of the table. Corbin sat to the right, arms crossed, face carefully neutral in the way that people who are trying not to look conflicted look very conflicted. "I want to address something directly," Dylan said once the room settled. His voice was warm, almost regretful. The voice of someone extremely practiced at this. "Last night, a member of our security staff filed a report alleging that I was removing confidential files from the server room." He looked around the table. "I want everyone here to understand what actually happened." He explained that he had been working late on authorized document archiving, that he had received approval from IT, that the security guard in question, he didn't use her name, he didn't look at her, had approached him in a manner he could only describe as accusatory and had photographed him without permission. "What concerns me," Dylan said, his voice dropping just slightly, "is the pattern. This isn't the first time a night shift employee has overstepped, but filing a formal report against a senior executive based on a glimpse of a file name." He shook his head, slow and sad. "That's a different kind of problem entirely." Mara watched Corbin's face. He was looking at the table. She waited for him to say something. She had the photographs. She had the timestamp. She had an 11-page incident report with section headers because her brain did not know how to be imprecise about things that mattered. Corbin said nothing. The room shifted. She felt it the way you feel a temperature drop. Not dramatic, just sudden and real. Someone to her left cleared their throat. The head of operations made a note on his tablet that she suspected had nothing to do with anything. "I understand," Mara said quietly and stood up. She walked out before anyone could say anything else, which was the only dignified option available to her. She sat in her car in the parking garage for 23 minutes. She wasn't crying. She had cried about the last job, the one where they had quietly restructured her out, and then given her a reference that described her as technically competent but difficult to integrate with team culture, which was a very clean way of saying she had noticed the CFO was misrepresenting earnings and had been too honest about it to the wrong person. She was not going to cry about this. She opened the Notes app on her phone and began itemizing everything she had documented. Timestamps, file names, the access log entry she'd photographed before leaving the server room, the transfer completion notification still visible on the terminal, 11 photograph, a 900-word incident report and its 2,000-word supplementary version that she had written at 4 a.m. because the first one had not felt thorough enough. At the bottom of the list she typed, "He chose the comfortable assumption over the documented truth." Then she deleted it because that was not useful information. It was just accurate. She drove home. She set an alarm. She slept for 4 hours, which was 3 more than she expected. The KTI meeting was in 3 days, then 1. Mara had been placed on administrative leave pending review. She spent the first day reorganizing her kitchen cabinets by category and then subcategory, which helped. She spent the second day watching Meridian Capital's stock price and noting a slight dip in afternoon trading that was probably not coincidence. On the morning of the KTI meeting, she woke at 5 a.m. to a text from a former colleague, a woman who had left Meridian 6 months ago and kept in loose touch. Something weird. Kyung-ho's prep team sent over their talking points this morning by mistake. Mara, Meridian's internal numbers are in there, their actual numbers. Did you hear anything? Mara sat on the edge of her bed for a moment. Then she got up, put on the closest thing to business casual she owned, and drove to Manhattan. The lobby of Meridian Capital Group was all glass and pale marble, and the specific kind of quiet that expensive buildings curate deliberately. Mara walked through the main entrance at 7:48 in the morning and went directly to the security desk, where the day's supervisor looked up with an expression of polite alarm. "Miss Ellington, I need to speak with Mr. Hayes. You're on administrative leave. You can't." "I know." She placed her phone on the desk, face up, showing the text. "Please tell him it's about KT. Tell him the pitch deck was already in the competitor's hands before his team walked in." The supervisor looked at the text, then at her, then he picked up his desk phone. She waited. 4 minutes later, the elevator opened and Corbin Hayes stepped out. He was in a full suit, tie straight, the expression of a man 90 minutes from the most important meeting of his quarter. He looked at her and she could see him calculating whether this was another complication, or the thing that finally explained all the other complications. "Come upstairs," he said. She showed him the text. She showed him the 11 photographs she had taken in server room C, backed up to 3 separate cloud accounts because she was not someone who left things in only one place. She showed him the transfer log she had quietly requested from an IT contact before her leave began. She had friends in IT, the kind of friends you make when you're both on nights and there is a lot of quiet and bad vending machine coffee between you. The transfer log showed a completed outbound file package from Dylan Pratt's authorized credentials at 3:17 a.m., sent to an external address registered to a competing fund. Corbin sat behind his desk and did not speak for a long time. "I stayed quiet," he said finally, not as an explanation, as an admission. "Yes. I thought," he stopped. "You thought it was more likely I was confused about what I saw than that Dylan was doing what he was doing." She said it without inflection. "That's a reasonable thing to think, given the information available to you." "It's not, actually." His voice was quieter now. "You had photographs, you had a detailed report. I had Dylan's word and 13 years of prior trust." He looked at her directly. "I made the wrong call." The morning light was coming through the windows at a low angle, catching the surface of his desk. His coffee mug was on the left side of the keyboard again. She almost moved it. She stopped herself. "The meeting is in 80 minutes, she said instead. "Kyung-ho already has your deck. You need a different angle." "What do you mean?" "They know your numbers. They came in expecting to negotiate from a position of information. But they don't know that you know they have it." She tilted her head. "Change the deck, not the deal terms. Those are sound. Swap the regional projections for the updated Q3 model. It's more favorable anyway, and it's data they don't have. Their prep will be 30 minutes behind the actual conversation." Corbin looked at her for a moment that stretched slightly longer than was professional. "You worked in investment analysis," he said. "For 4 years before I didn't." "What happened?" Mara picked up her phone from his desk. "I noticed something I wasn't supposed to notice and was too honest about it to the wrong person." A brief pause. "It's a recurring theme." Something shifted in his face. Not pity. She would have left immediately if it was pity. Something more like recognition. "I owe you an apology," he said. "A real one, not the kind that arrives after things have already worked out." "The meeting is in 78 minutes, she said. "Apologize after." She sat in the back of the conference room during the KTI meeting. This was not standard. Corbin had asked her to stay, and she had stayed, and she had spent the first 10 minutes acutely aware that Dylan Pratt was seated across the room and could see her, and did not look remotely happy about it. Then the meeting began and she stopped thinking about Dylan. The Kyung-ho team, 4 executives and 2 interpreters, arrived with the quiet precision of people who had prepared extensively. Their lead negotiator, a woman in her 50s named Park Soo-jin, opened with a set of questions that were very specifically targeted at numbers Meridian had just changed. The Meridian team answered with the updated data. A pause. Park Soo-jin exchanged a glance with her colleague, a short exchange in Korean. The interpreter said, carefully, "The current projections appear more favorable than what was previously indicated." Q3 data came in stronger than the model anticipated, Corbin said. "We updated the deck this morning." Another exchange in Korean. Something that sounded even through the register of a language Mara didn't speak, like recalibration. The meeting shifted. What had been prepared as a pressure negotiation became something else. A genuine conversation. The numbers were better. The deal terms, revisited in light of the updated data, were more interesting than either side had originally anticipated. 2 hours later, when Park Soo-jin stood and extended her hand to Corbin, she said something in Korean. The interpreter translated with a tone that was almost amused. She would like to discuss an increased stake. Not 800 million, something larger. Mara looked down at the table. Park Soo-jin's water glass was slightly off-center on the coaster. She did not touch it. She was getting better at that. Afterward, Corbin asked Mara to wait in his office while the legal team handled the initial framework calls. She sat in the same chair she had occupied 3 days ago. The coffee mug was on the wrong side of the keyboard again. She moved it to the right. Corbin walked in 20 minutes later, tie loosened, and stopped when he saw the mug. "You keep doing that. It's ergonomically incorrect. You're right-handed." "I know I'm right-handed." "Then why is it always on the left?" "Because Patrice keeps it near the outlet to keep it warm." He sat across from her, not behind his desk, which she noted. CEOs who sit across from you instead of behind the desk are trying to say something with the gesture. The outlet is on the left. The mug should still be on the right. Ceramic retains heat adequately, and your wrist won't have to cross the keyboard every time you reach for it. She paused. Basic ergonomics. Corbin looked at her for a moment. "You have a position on every object that's slightly out of place, don't you?" "Only the ones that actually are out of place. Most people stop seeing them." "And you can't." "No." He nodded slowly, like he was placing this information somewhere deliberate. "Dylan is being escorted out of the building right now." Legal confirmed the outbound transfer. Ike pulled the full log. He exhaled. He had a buyer, a competing fund. They were planning to use our deal architecture to undercut us on the next KTI round. "I know. You knew before I did. I saw it 3 days ago." The words landed between them, accurate and slightly sharp the way true things sometimes are. "I know," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. Not because it worked out. Because you were right and I chose the comfortable assumption, and you paid for it." The apology was real. She could hear the difference. She had calibrated against enough false ones to know. Corbin reached across his desk and slid a folder toward her. "There's something I want to offer you, not a return to security." She opened it. The title at the top read, Director of Internal Risk Intelligence. "It's a new role," he said. "Patrice drafted the job description this morning between the deck revisions and the legal calls, so the wording is imperfect. But the premise is that this company has a blind spot problem. People in positions of trust who have learned to operate just inside the threshold of what gets noticed." He met her eyes. You notice something the entire overnight IT operation, the full security team, and the COO's own office missed entirely. I want that working inside this company during business hours." Mara read the description carefully. It was detailed and genuinely interesting. The salary had more digits than anything she had held before. "You created this position this morning," she said. "Yes." "Because you felt guilty." "Partly." He didn't look away. "And partly because I watched an $800 million deal nearly collapse because I didn't trust the person who was correct. And I have no interest in repeating that." She looked at the folder, then at his mug, now correctly positioned on the right side of the keyboard. Then out the window at Manhattan, which was doing what it always did, existing at an unreasonable scale, entirely indifferent to everything happening in this office. "I'll need to think about it," she said. "Of course. And if I take it, I won't pretend not to notice things to make people comfortable. I wouldn't hire you if you would." A pause. "Your badge is upside down." He looked down. His security badge, required on the floor at all times per building policy, was clipped upside down, photo facing his chest. He flipped it. "Better?" "Now it's crooked." He adjusted it. She tilted her head. He adjusted it again. "Stop," she said. She stood, crossed to where he was, and straightened the badge with 2 precise movements. Her fingers brushed the lapel of his jacket briefly. They were standing closer than the desk had made the conversation feel, which she registered in the part of her brain that tracked spatial information, and also, suddenly, in a completely different part of her brain. She stepped back. "There," she said. "Now you look like someone who runs something." "Did I not before?" "You did, you just also looked slightly upside down." He smiled. A smaller smile than the ones she had seen him use in meetings, which were calibrated and purposeful. This one looked like it surprised him slightly, like it arrived before he decided to let it. "Dinner," he said. "Tomorrow evening, not the building cafeteria. I'll reorganize the silverware if it isn't aligned. I'll call ahead and request aligned silverware." "I mean it." "So do I." Mara considered this. She considered the folder on the desk, and the badge she had just straightened, and the 3 days she had spent in her apartment sorting kitchen cabinets and watching stock tickers and telling herself she was fine. "The silverware needs to be right before I sit down," she said. "Not adjusted by me, by the restaurant. I'll confirm it personally. No agenda if this is a working dinner." "It isn't." "Then yes." She picked up her phone from the desk. "I'll think about the job. I've already decided about the dinner." He blinked. "What does that mean?" "It means the dinner was easier." She moved toward the door. "The job requires more thought." She left before he could answer. That was, she had found, usually the right moment. 3 weeks later, her name appeared on the Meridian Capital internal directory between Dylan Pratt's empty listing and the head of regulatory compliance, Director of Internal Risk Intelligence. Her office was a corner room on the 31st floor with a window, 2 monitors, and a pen holder that had been pre-stocked by facilities with pens in 3 colors, mixed together without apparent logic. She sorted them on her first morning: blue with blue, black with black, red standing alone in the back because red was for emergencies, and emergencies should not feel casual. Corbin appeared in her doorway at 9:15 with 2 coffees, badge straight, holding his mug in his right hand. He looked at the pen holder. "You sorted those already." They were mixed. "They're pens. They are categorically distinct objects stored without regard for category." She accepted one of the coffees. "Thank you." He leaned against the doorframe, looking at her desk. Immaculate, every surface at a precise right angle to every other, the monitor exactly centered, the notepad flush with the keyboard edge. The kind of order that had its own quiet logic if you understood the logic. "Does it bother you when things are wrong?" he asked. "Or only when you can't fix them?" Mara thought about it. It was a better question than most people asked. "Both," she said, "but only one of those is actually a problem." He nodded, slowly, in the way that meant he was storing it somewhere that mattered. "Your mug," she said. He looked down. He was already holding it in his right hand. "Oh," he said, "I learned." "Good." Outside the window, Manhattan arranged itself in its usual impossible geometry: 31 floors of glass and steel and 8 million people all moving at angles that only looked like chaos from the outside. Mara Ellington sat at her precisely ordered desk, pens sorted, badge photo facing outward on its lanyard, and understood, for the first time in a long time, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The pens were sorted. That helped, too.